G'day everyone, it's Michael. Welcome back. It's been a little while. Bit of an interesting video here lined up for you guys. Bit of a different style for me. I've got a very important guest with me today, and I figured I would do a third video, sort of like the end of this little trilogy that I've done, talking about Endgame content and things within Monster Hunter. It's been a cool little ride so far, and thank you to all of the people that have come in and checked out my videos talking about this stuff. Obviously, we've quietened down since then, and Monster Hunter's been in a little bit of a quiet period the last few weeks, but obviously we've got the title update 3 coming out very soon. It's been a cool journey so far, and I just figured I'd get someone in to have a chat and get some thoughts from someone other than me, talking about Endgame. And we're going to be reacting to a video made by another Monster Hunter YouTube person, so excited to get in here, chuck some ideas around, and hope you guys are gonna have an enjoyable time listening. Meatman, how are you going, man? Good to have you on my channel, and you know, have a bit of a fun time with me. So how are you going?
I'm doing all right, man. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk about Endgame and Monster Hunter in general with you.
Sweet. Yeah, so obviously you've made a lot of videos, on a lot of the news and some of the updates and things like that. It's been an interesting time with Wild so far. It's been a bit of a bumpy launch, but yeah, you've obviously been covering a lot of different things, and you haven't done a 4-hour long video on Endgame specifically. So, any initial things to kind of say, or like what your kind of view on Wilds has been so far? Anything to say there?
If anyone's been tuning into my videos, for the most part, they probably have already caught on that I think Wilds is pretty par for the course as far as new gen ventures go for Monster Hunter. The strengths of title updates have been shown through Monster Hunter Wilds, but so has the weaknesses of title updates. And so, I mean, it's a hard thing to like really make a full judgment on Wilds as a game, because the way Capcom and the Monster Hunter team handles the new gen titles, you pretty much have a different game at launch than you do by the end of the title update cycle. And even down to like the final 2 title updates can be completely game changing for the game even more. I mean, look at Sunbreak, for example, in that category. So I've enjoyed my time. I take breaks between every title update, but that's not something that's particularly exclusive to Wilds. That's something I've done since I first started the series with World. So I've taken this time to play other games that have come out, from Silksong to Night Rain to Expedition 33.
Nice.
Some actual major players that came out this year. And I've also went back and I've started playing other Monster Hunter titles that I haven't played yet, like For You.
Yep. That's what it's all about. Hey, like taking a break, pacing yourself, and Monster Hunter is a grindy experience a lot of the time, and that's kind of what they're offering. But that doesn't mean that you need to grind all the time, and it doesn't mean that you can't have breaks and things like that. But the thing is, like, hey, could you make an argument to say, is the grind there, or is the grind sufficient, some people would say, or whatever the case may be. So it's like you're taking a break on your own volition, rather than you taking a break from the game because there's quote unquote nothing to do or not enough to do. That's kind of like an interesting discussion. It's probably been a combination of both for some people, waiting for title updates, waiting for more stuff to be added, and also other games coming out, like other stuff to do and things like that as well. That's what it's been for me, at least. It's like, hey, the talisman stuff coming in, I think that was sorely needed, and I think that was like a good update, even though, like you said, par for the course of like, hey, a lot of the stuff in the past has not been great on launch, and then they've added to it and come in with some improvements a bit later. So yeah, it's been a combination of both for me, at least. And it's not to say that I wouldn't be playing Wild still, because I think I am more happy now with like the grind, so to speak, of like, hey, you can go and fight 9/5s, get some talismans, keep farming.
Yeah. And what's nice is the 9/5 doesn't necessarily invalidate the previous 8-star grind as well. You still have the opportunity to grind for decorations and Ardean parts if you want to engage with those mechanics still, or if you have like talismans that you've already gotten that you're satisfied with. So it's like they haven't invalidated the previous grind, which I find to be very refreshing. Like you still have the opportunity to dip into all of it. It all has a place.
Yeah, having more options, like that is a good thing. Like that's a thing that I've mentioned as well. Like even though, iSpawn on its own has its own struggles with that sort of thing and what it was providing on launch, even though the guiding lands kind of were not in a great state at the beginning and it got better over time, the tempered investigations were still there. And I don't think that was a great system on its own anyway, but like the fact that there were different options, different ways of farming and different options for folks to engage with if it was their thing. Some people didn't like guiding lands at all, and that's completely fine. But maybe they were happy just doing investigations, or vice versa. They didn't like investigations, farming for decos, but they were happy in the guiding lands. Or some people didn't like both. So, like having more options is a good thing.
Or they relied on the event quests that they used to smooth out the holes, invalidating investigations fully later.
Right. Yeah. But more options is good. Like you say, don't even need to go for like the pinnacle content in Wilds. If you want to farm decorations, you can go and do that and keep progressing. Obviously, there's things we'd probably like to see of like, hey, maybe if talismans were more targetable, targeting by skill, targeting by certain monster, certain things like that. All sorts of like improvements and possible ways that they could be designing things. But like I say, I think having more options, that's a W. We'll take that.
Yeah. And that's the hard part about systems like these is like, you mentioned being able to target farm, and you mentioned it specifically as an improvement potentially. But for some people, that might not be an improvement. Like the nature of Skinner box RNG, even before the talisman system, people were like, we want monster parts to be more random and things like that. And there's different lines everyone seems to have of how much random they want in. So it's like it's hard to be like, yeah, this is clearly better and this is clearly not, because it's like I too would rather have something that's less like RNG dependent and more targetable, but it also, you'll get less yield and time out of that than you would something that's more random. So like that's a hard thing to, it's a hard balance. And I will always die by like, I'd prefer the complete, like if I'm gonna do something, I want to be rewarded and I want to be rewarded sufficiently, but I can understand the people that want the endless chaser grind, to people that grew up playing Diablo or something, they'd rather, they like the really, really small, minute Zen mode of repeating the same task over and over again for the slight chance of being able to get this item that's going to make their whole month, dude. Like they're going to be riding that high for a whole year,
Yeah, that's fair. And it's different strokes for different folks. I mean, we've talked about that, and obviously everyone's got a different disposition towards, being incentivized and feeling enough reward and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's different for everybody. I mean, and my stance on it, Monster Hunter, it's a pretty grindy experience. I'm here for the grind. I'm coming in with some sort of expectation of like, hey, there's going to be rare drops. There's going to be things that you got to work for, and that's kind of why I'm coming in with like a bit of a conditioned approach to that stuff, where like some previous games have offered that and catered towards folks like me a bit more, whether that's For You or Anomaly and Sunbreak. But that's not to say that, it needs to be like an ARPG or an MMO where the grind needs to be endless, because it doesn't. Like, I think there can be a balance and you can have limits and things can be sufficiently hard to get and you can have chase items, but also I don't think most folks are coming to Monster Hunter expecting like an endless sort of progression of rewards. I don't think so, at least.
not for lack of some people trying to convince people in the franchise.
Yeah,
That's how it works.
yeah.
I have 3,000 hours in every single one of them, except for this one because it's bad.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, we just watched that Ruri video, him chastising folks coming in saying that they don't feel super satisfied with, 9/5s even being something substantial to do. And I mean, hey,
It was, to be specific, it was people that were saying there's nothing to do.
yeah,
Which Ruri
I,
was
I,
rightfully
I
calling
yeah,
out that that's just actually wrong. Like,
yeah,
yeah, it wasn't that they were like middle of the ground of like they didn't like the style. No, there's people like that are actively saying there's nothing to do.
yeah.
There's no
Sorry,
challenging fights in the game.
yeah, that's a bit extreme, but it goes to show some people are, out there on that end of the spectrum, and they're still not, satisfied, even though, having 9/5s as an option with talismans is like so much better, and having the option, is so much better of a situation than what we had prior. So there's more improvement and stuff to come, but I definitely agree with him that obviously things have gotten a lot better in that regard, and that I think those people, it's a bit extreme on that end of the spectrum, So I'm definitely not campaigning for that. I just want there to kind of be a good middle ground of like a good grind. They've shown that they can do things before that work well. And yeah, my complaints have just kind of been like, hey, the launch experience doesn't necessarily need to be missing out on having this be here. Let's try and give some feedback and try and see what we can campaign for with future releases or whatever, looking back at prior games and how they've handled it,
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's a good little teaser and a good little entree here. Like I said, we've got a video lined up, which I am going to put up right now, from Mosaic Alkali. Shout out to you, making some great videos. Thank you. I've been subbed for a little while and watched a number of your videos before, so thank you for coming in with something here for us to use as a bit of a catalyst for some nice discussion. So I've watched this. I left a comment. I don't agree with everything in it, but I do agree with a number of things. And it was a great listen. So I figured, hey, this is a good opportunity to rope Meatman into a video and get his thoughts, and for all of you guys to not have to just listen to me bang on about in-game things. So yeah, if you're ready to start, man, we can let it rip.
I'm ready to go. Real quick though, Mosaic, I'm excited to see the video. I'm coming in blind to this. Just know if I disagree with anything, I'm gonna make it verbal, but I don't dislike you personally or anything. I'm just gonna,
of course,
state my viewpoints or whatever. I've seen a couple of your videos prior. I enjoy your content as well.
nice. Let's keep it wholesome. I think, yeah, it's important to say that because, yeah, we're obviously all interested and love the discussion about this stuff and just love throwing ideas around, but it's never ever really a personal thing, or we're coming after you, or we've chosen your video to pick on, or anything like that. I just thought it would be an interesting vid that kind of can put a nice little bow tie on the style of videos that I've been covering things about. So let's do it, man. Let's jump in. If you have anything you want to say, obviously just let me know and we can pause it.
All right,
here we go.
Ultimately, Monster Hunter games are designed to be things you sink many hours into. From the earliest games, you were meant to ascend the ranks, grind materials, and chase after the equipment you wanted for dozens or even hundreds of hours. Or perhaps thousands, you know who you are. Specifically though, the activities that you're meant to spend the most time on have changed over time. Generally, getting to the end of the main story in the game, whether that be the end of high rank or G rank, means you're sort of let off the leash. What you do from that point forward is up to you. It's this part of every game that has changed the most. The player has been given an increasing amount of direction and things to do, and chase after, even when the main section of the game is finished, to the point where the end of the game is actually the largest portion of it. This is the formation of the Endgame. So today, let's discuss endgames in Monster Hunter, the way they've taken shape and evolved throughout the series, and the impacts they have on the way the game is played. In Monster Hunter 1, you had 20 ranks and various quests that would become available to you based on those ranks. Once you reached 20, you were basically done with the game. All that was left for you to do was event quests, maybe unlock Fatalis if you haven't already met the requirements, and grind equipment. It's becoming something of a habit for me to say on this channel, but Monster Hunter 1 was largely inspired by older online RPGs. It makes a lot of sense then that this is what it offered at the end of the game. In many ways, the online RPGs of this...
Would you agree with that, by the way? I think that's like pretty fair, you know?
It's funny because a lot of people, I saw on Twitter the other day, some people were like, oh, Monster Hunter was this thing that set these trends, and even Dark Souls came after and clearly took a lot of inspiration from Monster Hunter. But it's funny because Dark Souls takes a lot more inspiration from games like Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask than Monster Hunter. Whereas like you can see other games like Phantasy Star Online specifically that Monster Hunter looks like it took a lot from. So it's like there's definitely like different branching pathways of like games lineage and inspiration. But Monster Hunter definitely took a lot of the MMO, ARPG, RNG. We're going to stretch. Like for example, if you were a Diablo 2 player, you know this. The end game is fighting specific bosses over and over again. It's doing bell runs for hours and hours and hours on end for specific rune words or specific pieces you could potentially pick up and either use or trade to somebody. There's just the repetitive Zen mode of doing the same thing over and over and over again for the chance of an incremental power increase of some kind, or to just replace one piece of gear with another piece of gear that's going to be better for you. And so like Monster Hunter clearly has taken that loop since 2004 in stride. The whole notion of, I mean, when you really break down the essence of Monster Hunter, sure they have the maps and everything, but the entire game boils down to there's no puzzles to solve, there's no adventure to go on. You're running to a map to fight a boss with a lot of little babies around. In first and second gen, you could argue that they're sub bosses, with the boss. At least some people would make that argument. And you're just repeating that ad nauseum over and over again. There's clearly a lot of inspiration taken from those grindy games, MMOs, things of that nature. And they did add their own spin and everything, with the different systems in place, like hit zone values, motion values. There is like some of that bleeds into other games as well. But Monster Hunter has such a unique aspect to it where the tail will have 20 blunt damage, hit zone value, and the head will have 55, but the head will have 50 slicing hit zone value. Like there's just so much different extra seasoning that they kind of did themselves, and they've carried that on. But as far as like internal like mechanics and systems goes, that complexity is about all that they literally generated themselves. The act of RNG boss rush style killing over and over again. I mean, even down to the fact where they have the timer that they show you the time that you killed the monster in, and that kind of helped to bleed into speedrunner culture, which was at its probably highest. It was definitely at its highest during old gen, whenever that was all you pretty much could do. The end game was getting to be a speedrunner and knocking that time down as fast as possible. So like the essence of time attack, boss rush, RNG, it definitely pulled from all those games he listed. It's definitely a product for that time period, and it's continued to be so.
Yeah, the bones are very, iterative in that regard. Obviously, taking a lot of those elements. I mean, like you say, there's a lot of their own seasoning as well. Like the itemization in some regard, like breaking parts, you know, and that leads to like the crafting of, you know, what specific materials do you need, that sort of thing. That's the whole like the hunting part of the game, I suppose, rather than it just being like a boss rush and them adding their own little flavor into the mix of like, hey, yes, we have this boss rush sort of experience, but there's all these little nuances that kind of come into play of like, okay, we're looking for certain materials to upgrade certain equipment, you know, the crafting, you know, cutting off, whether it's a tail or whatever, looking for those materials to achieve progression, you know, and it makes sense. I mean, like he says, the old gen Endgame was just, yeah, the bones of what the series offers in terms of, hey, this is the progression here, that's it, and then it's just ranks, and then yeah, time attacks and stuff being the ultimate, you know, the pinnacle of what people are trying to, you know, achieve. So
yeah,
he's
and not to say it wasn't like, so maybe the way I described it a little earlier was a little more reductive than it actually is. So like you also had some people call it survival, even like survival horror like aspects,
the resource management and stuff like that. Yep.
Yeah, resource management, and that mattered a lot more in first and second gen, where you only had a certain amount of space in your actual item box at home, and you also couldn't send monster parts and quest rewards directly to the item box from the quest menu. So you would have to actually pick and choose what you go into the hunt with, and you also had less slots at that time period too. You had less space to carry more things, and if you carried too much, you would have to drop things before you could even get all the stuff for your quest rewards. So there was a lot more item management at that time period. And the actual like RNG of monster parts. For example, shout out to Monster Hunter Old School. There's some cool guys in my server, Adam being one of them.
Yeah, shout out to Adam.
Shout out to Adam. Dude's a wealth of knowledge on old gen Monster Hunter. But he was showing off the Fatalis Greatsword from Monster Hunter 1. And it required, to make it, to fully upgrade it and stuff, you had to have 5 Rathian plates and 5 Rathalos plates. And apparently that, like, to this day and age, it's like, oh, plates? Dude, that's nothing.
Yeah.
That's actually nothing. But at that time period, apparently that was like the biggest flex item you could get, because it would take forever to get all of those materials and have the RNG to be able to make something like that. So it wasn't that, oh, there was less grind. No, the grind was localized more into the rare monster parts that we know of now were much, much more rare and harder to get.
Yeah,
so
and more were required. You needed more, or whatever it was. Yeah.
So it's like there was a lot of reason to fight the monsters over and over and over again, while maintaining your item box. Because, hey, you don't want to get an actual good item and then you don't have any space for it in your item box.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're gonna have to throw some stuff away. You can't hoard items like you can now.
Yep. Nice. I think he is spot on in that regard. So we can continue on. Let's let him cook a bit more.
This time were basically just social platforms for you to hang out and grind in. The game's main experience was the progression through the ranks, and how much time you sunk into it beyond that was left entirely up to you. You had plenty of difficult to obtain equipment that would require many hours of grinding, but the game didn't direct you toward it. You could say the game trusted that if you had enjoyed the experience up to that point, you'd probably want to keep playing, and do the grinds as a matter of course. Monster Hunter 2 would see the addition of an endgame rank grind, where you can continue gaining ranks beyond the main story cap, all the way up to 999. This didn't benefit you in any particular way, other than unlocking cosmetic name icons. However, for the most part, the so-called endgame stayed the same through all the first and second generation games. You beat the main part of the game, and then you could choose to grind out all the equipment you wanted at the end. Going into the third generation of games, though, this would begin to change. While Try would largely carry over the same rank system as DOS, and Portable Third would keep the same style as the second generation portable games, 3 Ultimate brought a new type of endgame. Most of the game's main story worked like a portable game, where you go from one rank to the next via key quests and urgent quests. Once reaching the final rank, though, this would unlock a rank grind similar to what you would find in Monster Hunter 2 and 3. From the end of G rank all the way through to rank 100, you would continue to unlock new quests. These were mostly multi-monstered quests and special boss monsters like Lucent Nargacuga or Abyssal Lagiacrus. These
Okay, I'll pause here. So, something I've talked about a little bit is this idea of hey, there's ranks, you unlock certain monsters or certain quests or something like that as you increase your HR or your MR. I don't know. I mean, yes, rank grind is an endgame in a sense, but I guess my stance on it is since I'm only looking at things from more of an RNG based reward, what is the rewards that you're actually getting from, say, a system. Obviously rank grind is not really a system. It's not like a mechanic that you kind of engage with. It's a bit different. I get what he's saying, but at least for me, I would just call rank grind core progression. I wouldn't call that an end game. It's just the end of the game, and I think it's important to distinguish those. Yes, the higher tier rank associated quests and 3 ultimate, they are the end of the game. They're the end game quests, but it's not that's a system or something that you actually play within. Obviously the talisman system is more I would say a system that people are going in, they're trying to farm the rewards, they're trying to grind for those items. So I get what he's saying. I just don't look at it the same way. It's just probably my own bizarre outlook on things. And there's nothing wrong with that, really. Hey, we got quests that you can unlock if you grind, you raise your rank high enough, these monsters become available, and that's become a thing since these games. We had Sunbreak, you had rank associated quests, even as far as World and Iceborne as well. You had multi-monster quests unlock at higher ranks, things like that.
I think it kind of depends, right? So the essence of end game, what is end game? You can make an argument that it is post credits, just things that you can unlock and do that are optional, or that you can dive in that are optional. You could say that they are systems that unlock a whole new tier of content or things to that nature after the story credits roll. But a lot of it can be arbitrary. So for example, if I were to lock down the investigation system behind the final boss and be okay, now that you've beaten this, you get super investigations where you unlock random quests versus super powered versions of the monsters with random talisman rewards or something like that. And I lock it down behind end game. That would technically be an in game system.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
That would be just for expanding, post story content. One could make the argument that locking down monsters behind rank progression is a facet of end game. But that's also a weird thing as well, because technically Wilds had a post-story type deal with low rank being where the credits rolled, but then there was all sorts of sub-arcs afterwards, and also unlocking the tempered monsters and everything to that nature. Technically, you could make the argument that all of high rank was converted into end game, which is really weird.
Yep, that's true.
But we know that it's beneath the veneer of it being a low rank story and then all of that. We can probably more so think of it as the same thing behind a base launch for like an old gen title where they would only have village for low rank and you would have the low rank village story and then you would have a hub progression, which was just completing key quests and urgents until you get to the final urgent. So like in 4U, you beat Shagru Magala and credits roll, but getting through G rank and then beating Gog Mazios, credits don't roll, but that's technically the end of G Hub, besides like the age texts. And the age text could somewhat be similar to the HR system where you're having to do more quests to unlock the ability to fight harder monsters or harder versions of monsters. So it's really hard to really like diminish the idea that fighting, a leveling system or HR system isn't necessarily an in-game system. It's just a different flavor of it, I would say. One that has more of a finite lifespan, if that makes sense.
Yep. I think that is completely fair. Like, it's different things. Obviously, in Try, obviously he talks about this being a thing that was introduced more in 3 Ultimate, but I mean, I would more say that like the talisman system being a thing is more of an in-game than just locking down monsters behind ranks. Like, at least in my opinion, you have an entire like reward system, and admittedly, it was pretty poorly handled in 3rd gen talismans, but the system existed. They built it up as like, hey, this is something to go after. This is a system that you can look for more ways of, changing builds or making sets or, a reason to go out and farm more, like an incentive. But I get what he's saying completely. It's like, hey, this is the incentive to go and grind. You grind rank, you unlock more monsters. Like, it makes sense. And I mean, hey, that's pretty much what it was prior of like, you just go through the progression, you unlock harder things, you unlock more options for builds, and then it stops, So I get what he's saying.
Yeah. Well, for the sake of, flavor and counterpoint, the concept of the talisman being an in-game system, because it's present the entire time you can play, ultimately, until you get to the final like rankings of talismans possible, you could make an argument that it's not necessarily an in-game system because you've already been participating in it the same way that you've been participating.
That's true.
In any other like talismans, and you've been doing it throughout the course of the entire game. Whereas like if you were wanting to make Lucent Nargacuga gear, that's not
you have to get it to the end of the game.
For you.
Yeah, you have to get to the end.
Until you get to the end of the game and until you level up your HR. So you could technically farm Final Boss over and over again for the talismans, which, that is an element to end game. But then you could also draw the arbitrary line of, since technically, even though it's not likely, there is a definitive best in slot talisman. If you were to somehow, because the RNG for talismans it's intentionally really bad. It's intentionally really bad because it's meant to keep you farming for them. If you were to somehow get that, because you have the capability to get the best in slot talisman by that time period, it would be the actual end game would end up being the HR grind because you would have no other incentive to actually grind talisman.
Yeah.
In the same vein as if you were trying to make the dragon sword, the Fatalis blade in Monster Hunter 1, like you're having to grind RNG parts for making this weapon. And so like technically it all could have an end. It's just a matter of stat tuning RNG and all of that things. And so like even like now, for the audience at home, you're listening to us like ruminate over what really is an end game, what could be classified as such.
Yeah.
Like we're literally having to stumble over what all could actually be considered an end game or not, because technically it's all rooted behind the same thing. How is it meant to capture more time played after the credits roll? And things like talismans are very, very good at doing that because A, you can make the RNG really bad, but because monster RNG isn't as bad, you can already have like a good build without having a great talisman. But a great talisman can help you change up your builds and literally fit like a couple more skills potentially in a set that would not be able to do that classically. So it will be game changing from a set building standpoint to engage in that system, which is why you want to engage in it because you want the better talismans. You just aren't guaranteed one. So it's like it's meant to keep you on the hook for longer, which is why like if you're listening to MrMH, you're like, well, technically any RNG could be in game. That's probably more in line with what he means. Something that's meant to keep you on the hook. That's not as easy to land. And so like, you know, everyone has different lines of what they enjoy and what they would consider, you know, what kind of cost they're willing to put into a game for what kind of reward. So it's just, whenever people say Wilds has no end game or no Monster Hunter has a good end game or like any take about end game period, that's why it's so divisive. It's because everyone has their favorite parts, but all of it comes at a cost. It's all RNG based.
Turns out talking about endgame is pretty complicated, which is why we're jumping on and doing this, and you're here trying to dissect stuff with me, and it's not just me banging on about this stuff, and it's my own weird takes and views on things, because yeah, that's like, you know, my own views of, hey, like, yeah, it just so happens that RNG is often the way in which playtime is extended. You know, I don't think anyone, that's not like a disputable thing. And obviously there's levels to it. It's like, hey, yes, they can make the RNG super horrendous, and that's the way that the playtime can get extended out. But are folks going to enjoy that? Not necessarily. It depends on how they're providing the rewards, you know, these other mechanics and things like that that contribute to whether or not the experience and the RNG or the repetitive elements of, you know, these systems are engaging. So it's not just like, you know, I'm campaigning for, oh yeah, we want more RNG, yeah. It matters how it's implemented. And obviously 3rd gen talisman RNG, there was no way of being able to target farm stuff. There's no way of being able to determine skills. You know, there's barely even an option to like get a decent amount, like a quantity of these skills, the talismans that you can even roll on, you know, and it just so happened that the best way to actually farm for those RNG based items was through mining. So it's like, there's a lot of like things that contributed to, you know, like that system on its own having issues. But yeah, typically like when I'm talking about, hey, and it's interesting. Look, the title of this video, he spaces out the words end game, you know, like, are we talking about the end of the game and what is available there? Are we talking about RNG based rewards that are most likely going to extend the end of the game? You know, it's a complicated thing, obviously, and there's so much to like go over and, you know, throw ideas around about this stuff. Because yeah, there's different things that you could construe as an end game. So I completely understand what he's saying. It's like, hey, this is the rank grind. You get rewards. This is the incentive to grind. You unlock more monsters, you know? I don't have the same view on that, but that's just my own thing of like, I understand it. I understand that it was different and that was the way they wanted to extend things out. And it's completely reasonable. You don't need to have a whole pile of RNG or involve that to like give folks a reason to play, you know? So it's completely fine. Okay, let's get back into it.
Introduced a completely new goal to the end of the game. While the grind for equipment was still there, if you wanted to actually fight all of the monsters and be able to make some of the strongest gear in the game, you would also need to grind for ranks as well to unlock all the monsters in the game. Of course, these two things paired fairly well. For the most part, you could just get ranks while grinding for monster materials. It was a minor incentive that could make people want to keep playing a little more than they may have otherwise done in any previous game. Depending on how lucky you were with making your main sets, it may even spur you to start making additional sets and crafting additional weapons you don't typically use just to fill the time until you unlock every monster. The fourth generation of games is where we started to see the more modern perception of an endgame take form. While this set of games also came with a post-game rank grind to unlock additional quests, the bulk of their endgame content was in ancillary systems. In 4 Ultimate, you had guild quests. These special quests had to be obtained via several means, such as fighting monsters on expeditions to the Everwood. These quests would have levels associated with them that indicated their difficulty. Completing the quests would increase its level, which would affect the monster's stats, as well as other parameters on the quest like making the monster frenzied or adding invaders. While doing quests in the Everwood, you would also obtain relic equipment. These relics would have random stats on them based on the level of the quest you got it from. It was possible for these to end up being quite powerful if you got lucky. Speaking of frenzied monsters, this was also tied into the endgame system. At the end of the game, you could fight powered-up monsters called apexes that were significantly stronger than their normal counterparts, and required a special item called a Y-Stone to help you suppress their power. By fighting these powered-up monsters, you could then utilize the final endgame system of augmentation. Using items you got from the Apex quests, you could power up your equipment beyond their normal upgrade trees and levels to become significantly more powerful. As you can see, the transition from 3rd gen to 4th gen was quite abrupt. Now there's practically a whole new game unlocked once you reach the end of the main story. This is where you can really see a clear line drawn between the main game and the post-game. If you were to try playing 4 Ultimate like you may have played a game like Monster Hunter 2, you would actually just miss out on a ton of content. It's not really enough to just farm up a bit of gear and be done with it. Now you need to grind rank to unlock all the monsters, grind guild quests to get the best relic equipment, grind apexes to max out your augments. Of course, none of this is mandatory, as always, but there is a very clear shift in design where the game certainly tries to lead you toward having more and more things to do. Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate acted as a sort of blueprint for all future games.
Right, I'll pause there as well. Yeah, and he's right. Like, this is exactly what was happening. We just obviously talked about, and watched the video on 4U and how the shift in design, towards these mechanics and systems and difficulty more localized at the end of the game has potentially come at the expense of that difficulty being more evenly distributed throughout the progression. So he's right, like, this is exactly where things started to change. And I mean, hey, you could say talismans being a thing in 3rd gen, that was really the inception, and I would kind of make that case, because obviously that was the genesis of like, hey, there's an entirely new like RNG based reward that you can grind for. But obviously, yeah, 4U dialed it up a lot, expanded on things. They still had talismans as well as its own thing. And then, yeah, just equipment being randomized, which, and I've talked about this, I think was handled pretty well. Yes, there's a ton of things that they could have done and ways of, improving that system, and I wish they had done that, and obviously they weren't able to make changes on the fly. But yeah, the bones of what was there, level-based quests, increasing difficulty, frenzy and apex monsters. We've talked about how Y-stones we think are pretty awful. So that's one thing that they could have done away with if they were to bring this system back. But there's a lot of things that I think were done pretty well within the system of like how guild quests worked and what was available, what the incentive was, the difficulty in which you needed to overcome to get those rewards. Has its issues. I'm not going to sit here and say that like it was a perfect endgame, but I think within the context of the series, it's pretty decent stuff, and especially for how old it was and like the first attempt at kind of making something like that. A lot of things to like. And yeah, I guess within the context of like other games or other genres and things like that, it's maybe there's a discussion to be had about how does this hold up. Maybe not super well, but within the context of the series, first outing doing this stuff, I think it kind of achieved its goal. And like he says, it's not mandatory. You can stop once you've gone through progression or you've done Gogmazios or that sort of thing. But for the folks that want to keep grinding, I think it did its job fairly well, and then it set the blueprint for things later on.
Definitely. I think the strengths of having an endgame system like this in place is that I like the way Mosaic actually worded it. It's like you unlock a whole new game after you've completed the game.
Mm-hmm.
And you can still beat all of the aged text quests and all of the like events and everything without engaging in the guild quest system to get divine orbs to further maximize your defense, without getting beshackled armor to get, edge master or edge lore on specific pieces, or even potentially double up on both honed blade and steady hand for whatever reason you would want to do that.
Yeah. Or readiness on greatsword, you know, all sorts of stuff.
True. And then like relic weapons, like some of the weapons benefited very greatly from them, yes. But you could still comfortably beat the content or even speedrun without participating in that. Now, it's not like you'd be able to compete with like a relic greatsword if you were a greatsword player, but if you just wanted to keep it kind of vanilla, you could still do that and challenge yourself if you wanted to. So I like the aspect of, here are new systems, new incentive to play, dive down if you dare, but you don't have to. There's still plenty of things for you to do at like an end game pace if you just wanted to do that without engaging in the guild quest system. And I think that's a very refreshing thing. Now, we can see their shift into systems like this, and you mentioned it earlier, potentially at the cost of some forms of difficulty in progression. Historically speaking, we can see the markdown in the difficulty of progression starting in like 3rd gen, is whenever people really started noticing it. People would also link it to the portable series versus the PS2 series, things like that. But we really start seeing it begin in 3rd gen. Specifically, most people that know what they're talking about would argue portable 3rd and on. And so, but the thing about it is, back in the day, 2004 Monster Hunter 1 drops. There's no such thing as G rank. There's no like into game system conceptualized. No, the game is, here is the game. We're going to steadily crank up the challenge across a 20 HR period, and then you can fight Kieran and Fatalis later.
Yeah.
And that kind of like would carry on. Monster Hunter's constantly like iterating off of itself, and that would carry on and through like 2nd gen and everything to that nature. Funny enough, 2nd gen Monster Hunter DOS was crapped on critically. People couldn't stand DOS. There's people that to this day will say DOS is the worst game in the series, or like they'll be like, Monster Hunter is there's no bad game in Monster Hunter, but then someone will have to say like, oh, but DOS exists. Things like that. And DOS is that hardcore, you're in progression, even in low rank, you're going to get your balls snatched by some of these monsters potentially. You're going to face a Gravios that you're going to bounce on everywhere. He's going to roar, and it's going to guarantee a laser beam to your face if you're not slanted to his right or to the left, so he doesn't have to do a pivot turn. Like, you're guaranteed true damage. You're guaranteed getting hit hard. You're guaranteed small you have Hermitars that move faster than G-rank monsters in New Gen. I'm just kidding. That's a little bit of exaggeration, but like that, it's that kind of hardcore.
Yeah.
So like the mindset's different. Now we have super versions of monsters. We have Tempereds and Frenzies and Apexes and Hypers and super duper meaty monsters and like all sorts of craziness going around alongside end game separate systems like Anomaly, Guild Quest. We have different systems that seem to be complementary to the progression, like the Deviant quests, but everyone that killed the Deviant monsters knows that it's probably better for you to start farming that and doing those quests with a full set, with a good set, not do it during progression. So there's just so much, like they're splitting their focus on distributing the challenge across a much broader game and a much broader pool. After fighting Guild Quest 140s with you, Michael, I can say like there's a lot in common with like the EX Deviants in GU. Though even the EX Deviants hit harder than a lot of the 140 GQs and they have more chip. So like there's, even though it's like the apex of some of the stuff, it's like even then like difficulty breaking down from like damage that can be done to you, different tools at your disposal, how long it takes to grind up to a 140 guild quest, you know, as opposed to like grinding up to a 300 anomaly quest from level 1, you know, things like that. Like all of that changes from game to game. But back in the day, they didn't have to worry about any of that. It was just, here's the monsters, make the sets you want, or fight them, make their parts if you want, and go. And some people really like that. I really like having more things to do and more incentive. And with that comes, I like the fact that they will feed into these different systems. But if they're going to make these systems, that means they got to peel it back a little bit from the monster RNG so that the builds can be complementary and you still feel like your time is being rewarded. They have to peel back on the monster difficulty to a certain degree in progression because, well, we got to have some kind of curve. You know, we can't just go from intense to more intense to even higher intense.
Right.
You know, otherwise people aren't going to play. And more than likely, that is what happened in series. The reason why they toned it down is because people were bouncing off. I mean, even in the easiest titles of Monster Hunter, there's still complex games that can beat down the average gamer. So it's not, this isn't a very, very, very easy, simple series. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot of things. The learning curve is high when you're a new player, and the learning curve can be high even if you're not a new player and you're just trying to learn new weapons or things like that. So there's all sorts of different things they have to take into account and balance now. So there's definitely pros and cons to having old school style, but it's impossible for them to do that now with all of the new systems that they're constantly doing and the demand of the player base. The player base has expectations, and the majority of the players have joined post 3rd gen, where there have been things like talismans, where there have been things like weapon augments, where there have been things like RNG decos or RNG talismans. You know, like the majority of the player base never got to experience that old school style, nor do a large section of them. They never want to. They don't care to.
Yeah, well, that's part of that conditioning. You know, like you just said, you like having more things to do. So do I. I'm all about that. And it matters, obviously, to, you know, it just being there. It obviously matters what is, you know, what are the mechanics involved in it? What way are the rewards structured? How do you achieve them? You know, how engaging is it for those reasons? Do you feel like you're getting things back? You know, so yes, we like things that offer more of that. You know, I've been conditioned with that, starting with Try, where talismans were garbage, in my opinion, and they've obviously gotten a lot better since then, which is good. And then, yeah, getting into 4U, having this whole new world of like rewards and incentive to go after, that was great, and I think it was handled well. But obviously, it just being there and them offering more reasons to go out and grind and things to engage with, it obviously matters, hey, what are the ways that we're designing this? And we can point to obviously many iterations of this idea that maybe didn't incentivize people to keep on playing as much. And a lot of the systems have been pretty lackluster in some regards, and we've all obviously given feedback about a number of those. So, and that's what it's all about, giving feedback and seeing what ideas we can build on and how things can actually move forward and improve. So, yeah, 100%. I mean, let's see what else he has to say.
Through 5th gen, you see many familiar faces. Powered up monsters with special drops for the best gear, augments, gear with random stats, systems upon systems layered to create incentives to continue playing for longer amounts of time. Now that we have our history out of the way, I think there's a lot to unpack in regards to the trends of the series' endgames. Not least of which is the fact that the modern games are live services. Monster Hunter games since World receive seasonal updates.
What did Rory just say? Monster Hunter is not a live service game. Yeah.
I mean, technically, it is a pseudo live service.
Yes, there's elements of it.
It's not. Yes, elements of it, but you can make the argument that elements have been a thing since the inception of Monster Hunter. Rotational event quests were a thing since Monster Hunter 1, as well as adding post-launch monsters and availability of different things, like through event quests, or, even down to White Fatalis being a G rank DLC type monster, title update type monster through the episodic quests or the Metal Wraths. So like it's they've always flirted with it. They're just much more blatant with it now, and they have a much more aggressive monetization model with it now. Though I think they lean into it too hard in new gen, I will always be extremely critical of the title update system because of that.
Yeah, and there's levels to that too. I mean, what are you introducing with these updates? We had Sunbreak bring in, Anomaly, like the bones of it, obviously, and then it improved over time. But, you're bringing in an entire new system, an entire little ecosystem for us to play around in, and a reason to keep playing in an update. I think that's like a good use of that idea. And it's not just like spacing things out that may or may not have been planned for the original game, or, juicing up the content when you could make a case that things should have been in a better state without that being brought to the game over time. So there's different things to that too, of like, hey, I'm at least fine with them supporting the game after launch. I'm fine with that. Yes, I want things to be in a good, reasonable state with a lot of things to do and things like that on release. And I'm fine with them bringing out more things to do in updates if they are done well. I don't think many people would have many issues with that. It's more, I think people get upset, obviously, when you have cases where maybe things were not as ready as they should have been at a baseline, and then they supplement things after that. I think maybe that's where people get a bit frustrated with the system, and I can definitely understand that.
Yeah.
Right, let's let him continue. Sorry, I just wanted to make a joke because that was very topical. All right, let's let him carry on.
Which add new monsters and other content. They also come with a variety of microtransactions, and of course, eventually lead up to the expansion, release, or a new game. When cast in this light, the endgame systems actually can look somewhat predatory. It's the standard live service playbook. If you can keep people engaged for longer, they're more likely to spend money and continue spending money. This is a profit incentive in making the endgames robust and full of things that make you want to keep playing and coming back with every new update. Whether you see this as a true dilemma or...
I'll pause on that as well. I don't think that's entirely the case. I get what he's saying, and you've spoken about this too. It's like, hey, there's cosmetics and, paid DLC and all sorts of things like this that, they've started doing recently. I don't think it's a thing where they're like going in with the mindset of like trying to build engaging endgame content for the sake of them like getting more folks to have more exposure to that sort of stuff. At least I'm coping and being maybe naive in that regard, because it's like, hey, they made 4 and 4U, right? They made guild quests and they did all these things when cosmetics weren't an option. Like, I think they are genuinely trying to make mechanics, build systems, and like give more of a reason to play. I don't think it's entirely like predatory or anything like that. Maybe there's an element of that going on, where yes, naturally, if you're getting people to keep on playing and that sort of thing, you're going to have more exposure to buying things like this. I've never bought DLC. I've never bought cosmetics. I've never done any of that. I've never been interested in it. I'm here to play the freaking game. and the more they can offer me, the more things that I have to do, fantastic. I'm all for that. But I've never at least been this hypothetical person that has, you know, been playing for longer because of a system like what we're describing, and then that has caused me to buy something additional. So that's just me though. And there's evidence of obviously that being the case. But admittedly, yeah, the design to introduce more DLC and paid items and paid content and cosmetics, obviously that has come around in the last few years of that being part and parcel of the gaming industry in general, which, hey, it's a bit of a shame that there's a lot of focus being put into that, maybe more focus rather than, you know, all this development time and resources that could perhaps be spent on improving the product, you know, rather than trying to build up things like this. But yeah, I just wanted to make a comment on that because I don't think it's like it's some like conspiracy theory to like add more things to the game to like get people to buy more things, entirely at least.
So to play Mosaic's advocate,
Yeah,
the concept of the title update system working in tandem with a heavy monetization, like lots of microtransactions and seasonal content, going hand in hand, is kind of like a self-feeding loop. More people coming back to play during a festival or during a title update, with more microtransactions that will be implemented at the same time period strategically, will effectively expose more people to cooler things. And they have had an escalation throughout the course of the last two games where they introduce either more unique content or even cooler content or more baity content. It's the same strategies that a lot of it mostly comes from the FPS genre, starting with like Fortnite with the battle pass system.
Fortnitification.
Yep. And what you do is you introduce cool things at the beginning, and you already have things implemented on the store. But later on, you might introduce even cooler things to incentivize, okay, now you're going to be double dipping. You know, you paid $20 for this skin, but now we have an even cooler skin that you might like. It's $20 as well. And so people that paid $20, they've been playing for months, they pay another $20. And it's printing money. And it's funny because you're replacing the previous thing you spent $20 on, unless you're doing something like a lot of Fortnite people would do, like fashion shows, like YouTubers and stuff.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that was built off of the need to justify spending hundreds of dollars on things that you no longer use anymore. But from this strategic standpoint, if we were to do something like implement a system that is similar to Guild Quests, but instead of it releasing on launch as the full package, we release it in tiny tidbits, and we only release 80 ranks at a time, and we tune it up as we go, and we do all these other things, when they could have easily, if they either waited or, you know, whatever, they could have easily pulled out the anomaly system and then made tweaks to leveling just like they did during each title update through the same title updates where they would release free monsters. You know, they could easily do something like that. But everything has to feed into, hey, we're giving you this bit, but now we're going to just kind of drag you around. I mean, even Iceborne did the same thing. There were 2 whole zones and augments and layered weapons and layered armor that were all drip fed through title updates. They want to keep and also, when you think about it, when did they first start getting more aggressive with microtransactions? Microtransactions. It was with Iceborne specifically.
Yeah, and even Base World, they started to do it. Obviously, they started to bring out cosmetics, and then they really dialed it up.
They dialed it up in Iceborne through the house system and the pendants.
Oh,
and all
yeah,
these other things.
Yep.
So like that's whenever they really started dialing it in. And during that time period, that's whenever they were purposefully withholding more stuff. Yeah. And we saw them lean into that with Rise. We saw them lean into that with Sunbreak. We saw them lean into that with Wilds. We've seen them lean into this style. And a lot of it is probably purposeful for the sake of exposing you to more stuff over time. Because just like a battle royale, where you're stuck doing the same thing over and over again ad nauseum, that is Monster Hunter. There are people that are going to play through the game, they're going to leave, and then they'll come back for new content or festivals and things like that, pseudo MMO style stuff. But they're not going to, if I release all the title update content at once, and then I release, okay, here's cosmetic pack number 2, there's going to be far less people that come back just for cosmetic pack number 2 than there are going to be for people that come back for, here's GOG Mazios, here's here's a big collab, here's all these other things, here's title update, here's the final section of the anomaly system. So when you have more people coming back, you have more people that are exposed to your potential microtransactions. The plush weapons from Sunbreak, there were so many people that bought those because they're really cute. And Wilds, they've been kind of toning some of the stuff down. Like they gave us the Firebird for free, which was really cool. Things like that. A lot of the festival armors have been legitimately cool. So like there is like some give, and maybe it's not. It's definitely not the Monster Hunter team, the developers themselves, that may be having to make these decisions. Maybe they're having to make some of these decisions as a way to appease their higher ups. But it's also not likely that making a bunch of microtransaction pieces of armor and stuff, that's not taking away from dev time for like actual monster rigging and things like that. The more than likely they just have some other people on hand. I mean, the Monster Hunter team is bigger than ever. They're bigger than they were whenever they're cranking out a lot of content for like GU and 4U and everything. So there's not really that much intersectionality. Like the microtransactions aren't taking away from the dev time and bug fixing. It's not the same developers that are working on these things. But could we use cooler events like we used to have in 3rd and 4th gen? Probably. I would definitely like that.
Yeah. Well, imagine that microtransaction content was able to be gotten in game. Obviously that's what it was. Like 3rd and 4th gen,
exactly.
The cosmetics that we now pay for could have been, event quests. And I mean, hey, we've talked about, White Fatalis being like title update, quote unquote drip fed content, and then withholding things, G rank Elatrion. I mean, I mentioned that a while ago in 3U. It was in the game files, but we had to wait for it to become a thing. At least, we can have criticisms about that being a thing in the way they release content, but a point in that, in that camp, in that favor is, hey, at least those, those portions of content that were withheld, that arguably, those event quests that you get rewarded with like cosmetic items or like entirely new armor sets or like seasonal equipment, a lot of that has been shifted to things that you actually pay for now. And obviously that wasn't a thing originally. It was just, here's an event quest, here's the cosmetics. The armor sets even had skills or weapons that had different values. It was actual equipment. It wasn't even cosmetics. That's still a thing in new gen, and obviously they're still doing event quests that reward that. But yeah, the cosmetics that we pay for now, that was a different a time long ago where maybe that would have been content that actually came into the game and you farmed for it, and that was the way you got people to come back to play.
Yeah, and there is a little bit of give and take. The title update system may have its flaws, but there are definite upsides. Through the title update system, we have had a lot of support go through Wilds of changing movesets, tuning things up as we went. 3U to this day has charm tables. Nobody likes that.
Yep.
Rise had charm tables. They fixed it within a month of it being caught.
Exactly.
And we can attribute that to them having a much more hands-on experience with the game, or with a more hands-on approach with tuning the game as they go, and the title update system as a whole. We saw the anomaly system get completely revamped in a lot of ways as they were producing it, and even changed up the way augments work in the middle of them rolling out augments. 4U, after experiencing the Guild Quest system, it could have really benefited from that. It could have
100%.
really benefited from tune-ups. So like there are a lot of different places where title updates, I'm actually kind of grateful for
they're
them
positive.
existing in the way they do. And in some ways, if the microtransactions helps fund that, I'm kind of cool with that. You know, people will throw up like figures like, oh, they have $1,000 worth of microtransactions in the store. Sure, overpriced DLC is fine or whatever, but they're not expecting you to pay $1,000 for all the items. I hate to break this to you, buddy, but they're happy enough with you spending $2 on a pendant for chimes or a potion. You know,
Yeah.
it's all free money to them anyways. They're literally just printing money. You could buy just one microtransaction. That's a victory for them. And so it's not that they're expecting you to. No one's forcing you to pay $100 worth of microtransactions.
The soundtrack or whatever.
Yeah, as Michael said, he's never felt the need to ever spend money on the microtransactions, and I don't blame him. I've spent very, very little on the microtransactions. What's wrong with me? I can't say microtransactions right now, dude. What is wrong with me?
You're good.
But yeah, like it's not like there's a conspiracy theory to empty your wallets. And sure, you could be like, oh, they're so greedy. It's style. Listen, it doesn't matter if they're selling it for like $1 a piece. If they're paywalling it, it's still not good. Okay, if it's only 30 items and it's $1,000, to me, that's annoying. Sure, I'm not gonna pay for that shit. But to me, it's more annoying if they make 1,000 items that are $1. I don't care about some moral grandstanding about the cash amount. The total amount of items, like if it was actually taking away from the game and they had like all of their lead designers and everything, hey, we're pumping out layered weapons. Those are the only cool weapons that are going to be available. No, there's cool free shit coming, and there was cool free shit in Sunbreak even whenever they first implemented layered weapons. So, you know, it is what it is. We're still eating good no matter what, as long as they keep feeding us with the proper stuff. So it's like, even like when you really think about it, Michael, a paid layered weapon wouldn't have worked as well. Well, actually, you know what? Maybe it would have worked better in old gen whenever layered weapons didn't exist. But there was just like that was the thing. Like, there's no layered weapons in old gen. They couldn't have done something like that.
Well, it was just an equipment that came out and it had its own stats or whatever. Like, it was just, that was an equipable piece of gear. That's what it would have been, probably.
And even then, like, because people love their stats so much, it's not like many people would use it unless it was good. And that's something like World actually changed up whenever, starting with the layered weapons that they implemented in Iceborne. We finally got to where we could run weapons that were event weapons as on our like good weapons. And so like that's cool. And they did that through title updates. So like that's cool.
Yeah.
So like there's a lot of give and take with this stuff. But I will say, yeah, Mosaic, I'm not going to disagree with Mosaic and say that they're definitely using the title updates and everything as a system to further and expose you and incentivize you to buying more microtransactions. But
it's a piece of it.
I wouldn't
it's a piece of it.
Yeah, it's just a piece of it. And you could argue that as part of the justification for the title update model.
Yeah, it makes sense, right? Like, naturally, it exactly lines up. It's like, hey, we've got the bulk of the stuff that we're making for an update. You know, we're doing a content drop. We've been in the lab. We've got some new monsters coming. We've got some new, you know, whether it's seasonal stuff or new equipment or whatever. And then also they have like a new, you know, batch of, you know, paid cosmetics or whatever. Like, it makes sense. Folks are coming back to the game. There's new cosmetics. People are going to go check it out. I get it. Like, I 100% get it. And it's the whole, like, ethereal thing of, if it's a financial thing and, you know, the cosmetics are $2, let's say, how much is the game? If the game is, you know, $60, $80, you would need 30 people to buy a cosmetic as opposed to one person buying the game. And it's this ethereal thing of like, okay, if you were focusing on, you know, all this cosmetic stuff that you're making, if we had an ideal world where there was no cosmetics and all of the cosmetic items that would have been on the shop that you could pay for were able to be rewarded and grinded for or farmed in-game, and it was all in-game based, everything was rewarded naturally as a natural incentive within the game, would that be the difference for generating more sales? Like if all these people are saying, hey, all this cosmetic stuff, all these pieces of little content, these equipment pieces, all of this stuff is achievable and rewardable in game. If people are ranting and raving and making really positive press, they're telling their friends about the game, all this sort of thing, is maybe that a way to generate more sales if all of this stuff is actually in game? Because all it takes is one person doing a sale, buying the game, versus 30 people buying a cosmetic, right? So it's this whole idea of like, hey, if it was designed that way and it was like all natural and there was less of a focus on it being a paid thing, optional thing, would that be a way for them to make more money organically? We don't know, but it's just something to think about, right? There's tons of and games used to be like that, Halo Reach or whatever. You were grinding equipment, farming, all sorts of things where you could get all these equipment pieces and, cosmetics and things like that through a progression system. Did that incentivize more people to buy that game as opposed to the amount of people that would have or would not have bought the equipment for $2 or something? We don't know, but it's just an idea. An ethereal sort of thing,
I think I think they've learned too much from the mobile gaming market. I think they know they can make money off of both. I mean, like, think about it this way: if one person doesn't buy the game because they're like, "Oh, well, I've heard bad things," there's going to be someone who spends $300 on DLC or on DLC on microtransactions. And they've already made more money to make up for that. And the thing with Monster Hunter is they found out that they could do both. They could have both. So it's like until one of those things drops off, we're not going to really see a change. And, maybe next game, I don't know. Monster Hunter has constantly surprised me with its trends and how things work. To be honest, after Base World and Iceborne, I didn't think Monster Hunter was going to be as popular as it was like 5 years later, but it still remained popular. Their marketing is genius. They're just excellent with that. The fact that they can, for lack of a better term, pull the wool over people's eyes.
Right. Yep. Get people to buy an entire DLC. Admittedly not at the same full price, but yeah, it factors into it. It's like, hey, possibly there are things that originally were, or things that in a vacuum could have been included with just the standalone release of a game, possibly being swept under the rug, or things being left out, or things being planned for, an entire other piece of content that you need to buy instead of the focus being more of the standalone experience, And I mean, I've spoken about that. It's like, hey, base games, we've been conditioned to have like, some meaty end game stuff that is going to keep folks playing or not playing. Why is it not more of a focus on launch? Instead of it being like, oh, this is just it. We don't need to have this here because it's not even G rank. This is not even the full difficulty experience. We don't need to have, reasons to grind. We don't need to have pinnacle content and high rank. Damn that. Where is, keep that same energy? Why is it not the thing that is available on release and then they keep on building it up? Like MH4, guild quests, other cases of like, hey, there should be, it's just taken 6 months to get 9 5s and a talisman system. There could have been so much more there at launch. They could have had more time to let it cook in the oven, whether it's involving the whole roster and like being able to craft talismans, like determine skills, million different things that they could have done. But alas, base releases, it's I mean,
once again, a lot of like things that you could cite as improvements are not things that they're initially thinking about.
No.
Even
Yeah.
things that have been critically received well across time.
Yeah. Because a lot
There's
of
not
people
many
didn't
people
like
that
guild
probably engaged
quests.
with the guild
Yeah.
quest system.
Maybe people
Same thing
didn't
with
like
the
it.
anomaly system. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's like anything we can think of, like, oh, this would be a net improvement. It's like there's definitely going to be a swath of people that were like, no, I didn't like that in the other game it was in. It's
100%.
like, okay, well, they could have
Yeah.
done it. They could do it better. You know, they could do it better. It's
Yeah.
like, no, I just didn't like it in the other games. What? Okay.
Yeah. There's always things to improve on and always things to look at and always, you know, feedback and information to be gained by looking back and taking on feedback. And I mean, hey, yeah, even if folks didn't like guild quests, there's obviously a ton of people that did, but acknowledge its flaws, like me. It's like, hey, rather than throwing out the baby with the bathwater, why don't you look at the things that people didn't like and the things that people did like, and then go from there and build it up? And we haven't seen, admittedly, Anomaly was very similar to guild quests, and that was the blueprint, but hey, we've had a number of base releases since MH4. Why not have, you know, some sort of carryover? Why not have take on improvements, take on the feedback, provide something substantial? And yeah, I mean, sure, there's going to be people that probably don't even like, that wouldn't like that sort of thing for various reasons. It depends how they're designing it. But the fact that there is more of a focus in the expansion to deliver that content, I think is a shame, because I don't think it needs to be the case, you know? Just because the release system works that way, and it's always been like that, it's like, okay, now the G rank expansion's coming along, now we need to really dial it up and have these offerings of, you know, pinnacle content and reward. I just don't think it needs to be the case. And you could build it up and have it there on release from the get-go and then carry it through to the expansion, you know? It's the whole status quo thing of like, just because something's always been this way, or, you know, this is how Monster Hunter works, those sorts of things. I just don't, I don't believe in that fully. It's not a reason to justify things as to why they can't be taking on improvements and taking on feedback, you know?
Well, the thing is, there's no justification, but there's also no expectation if you really like understand these devs, because they themselves don't know what feedback to take. They don't know like what. It's crude of me to say they don't know what they're doing, but they aren't students of the industry. Like, we're not talking about the Expedition 33 group that like clearly has seen the the theories and love for different games and classics, and also like pull from inspiration from a lot of different types of games in the genre. We're looking at a team of guys that literally created a subgenre, and then they never look anywhere else but at games that have made lots of money. So like they're people they've pulled inspiration from are not like the soulful darlings of the gaming industry. No, they're games that you remember Assassin's Creed Valhalla, how everyone shit talked it being bad. It's like the second highest grossing Ubisoft title that's ever been sold.
Right.
You remember how everyone was like Assassin's Creed Shadows is going to be bad?
Mm-hmm.
From my understanding, it sold extremely well.
Right.
You know how people shit talk sports games because they just reuse the same shit over and over again, and Call of Duty because they just keep doing the same thing over and over again, and they also do aggressive monetization and all these other things. Those games clear every game on the market and make so much money. Everyone
look at
crap
Wilds.
talks mobile.
Look at Wilds, it sold well.
Mobile games. They crap talk mobile games, but mobile games make more money than every game like combined. It's insane.
Yeah.
Like there's so much money talks, and it is talking to these guys. And so they, you know, whenever you see the metrics of, well, does monetary value and everything equal success? Depending on who you ask, yeah. And so they pull inspiration from Ubisoft. They pull inspiration from all these other games for like open world stuff, and they pull it from Sony games to make you have scripted walking sections that you can't walk too far away from. Literally, they do one Witcher event quest that people responded positively to, and so after every single cutscene, naturally, they have to add a stilted dialogue section where everyone is like you get like the illusion of choice to choose different dialogue options that result in the same thing. Like
Yeah.
copying other things like that. You get interviews where the reason why Wilds sold well is
It's 'cause of
attributed
the
to the
story.
fact that its story was good. And whenever most people shit talk the story, it's literally, and you also get like Japan making memes about Tokuda, and I think the term was like Takoshia or something like that. I forgot what the actual term was, but it directly cites an interview about Wilds around the time when Wilds was coming out. I don't know if you remember this, but Tokuda describing a scenario where he's like, maybe you're in the middle of a hunt, and then you come across a monster that's been wounded from many battles it was having prior, and now you have to weigh the options of like, okay, do I go finish that monster off and get some extra rewards on top, or do I just keep on with the task? And it's like Japan audience was like, that doesn't happen. This guy doesn't play his own game, or clearly didn't play his own game. Like that scenario doesn't happen. That is an impossible scenario in Monster Hunter Wilds. That doesn't happen whatsoever. Nobody knows what the fuck he was talking about. And like that's the thing. Like this is what we're dealing with. Like that these are the Monster Hunter developers. And like there's been missteps since as early as old as time. Monster Hunter has always been a flawed series. There's always been improvements that could have been made. There's always been cool things that they walked back and bad things that they walked forward. You know, like that's Monster Hunter. So like, yeah, there are like improvements and feedback, but there are also expectations as a consumer. We can't like all of a sudden forget all the flaws these guys have. We can't forget like you're making a whole like scenario where it's like, why aren't they like improving upon things that they did before?
Yeah.
Like these good ideas and like everything like that. Whereas like I'm thinking like these guys change it up like they changed up every base game and every DLC and like all this stuff because they don't know what's going to work or what's going to stick. They have no idea. And when you think about what they were mirroring with Wilds, they were mirroring World. They had the tempered monsters. Yeah, they did statistics differently than the tempered monsters from World, but it was still tempered monsters. They did tempered monsters. They did RNG decorations. They switched up a little bit. You know, they did take some of the feedback into motion where everyone was like, oh, RNG decos suck fucking ass. And then they remixed it up a little bit. They kind of did another RNG loop, but instead of augments, it was Ardean, which also kind of pulled from Rampage. Like there's so many like different things they're pulling from, but it seems like a lot of the times these guys are scrambling. Like they're scrambling to figure out what are we going to do? How are we going to incentivize? How are we going to make this work? I just don't think that the Monster Hunter team is capable of really reading the room. And if I were in their position, I'm not saying this as like a really mean-spirited thing. If I were in their position, it would probably be hard for me too, because there is so many different flavors of Monster Hunter fan that like so many different flavors of Monster Hunter. They have pigeonholed themselves in a way that they really can never get complete, like, useful feedback because everyone likes or dislikes certain things. Like a lot of your favorite aspects, Michael, the majority of the fan base never engages with.
Yep. Yep.
Like that's the reality we're living in, right? Like
I am in the minority.
This system is fucking great. But at the same time, you have content creators on YouTube who started their career off of Monster Hunter being like, yeah, I just never engage in those systems because I think they're stupid.
Yeah. 100%.
Whoa.
Yeah. It's tough. It's, hey, we're not game devs. We don't know. I mean, we're just consumers obviously giving feedback about, you know, this thing that we have before us, and then also obviously naturally comparing back to other things within the same series or the same genre. And yeah, like I'm one guy with my own preferences, my own disposition for different things. And hey, it's still important to look across the landscape and, at least in my opinion, you know, in everything that I do as well, get the 2 cents from everybody. You know, as many people as you can to throw their hat in the ring and consider a bunch of different things, because these folks are getting paid to build and design a product, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's hard for sure, no doubt. Like, we've talked with, shout out to Pedro in the Discord, great guy who has often tempered me for my expectations about things as a consumer, obviously being a dev. He reminds me a lot of the time that things are not as simple as I'm asking for, and that things are difficult, and no doubt that is the case, you know. So it's not about, trying to make it seem like we have all the answers or any of that sort of thing. It's just about, hey, this is my feedback that I'm giving as a consumer, and I think that is still valid, you know, as long as it's not completely unreasonable and I'm not trying to, ask for a whole pile of things and my expectations are not insanely high, because they're not. I mean, there are things that I wish were in a better state, but I'm not asking for, all these issues to be magically solved all at once. There's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of improvements to be made. And a lot of what I've talked about has been because of things that were in a better state in previous titles. I'm kind of going off, hey, these are some expectations that have already been set. These are some things that you've already done. Is it too much of an expectation to want those things that worked well to be brought forward and then improved? I don't think so. But hey, like you say, it's hard for them, and no doubt there's a ton of feedback that's coming in. They want to, I think there definitely needs to be more of an emphasis put on drawing feedback from different sorts of people in the community, not just me. I'm one guy making videos, but there's tons of people out there that are leaving reviews and giving good feedback, giving reasonable feedback, and suggesting things, coming up with ideas, all sorts of stuff. So yeah, the expectations is a very fair thing. And I mean, hey, just on the success of, the financial aspect, to just put a button on this little section here, Wild success, and just what we were talking about with the different, designs and changes that they've made, and whether or not Wilds has been successful from a financial perspective. It's like, yeah, the initial sales were pretty good, all things considered. It got off to a roaring start, and then, those reports have come out about things, dialing back, at least in, comparison to previous titles. So I can't remember what the report said exactly. It was something along the lines of like, World or Rise chugging along at a more steady pace as opposed to Wilds. I think where Wilds has a ton of people coming in at launch.
Wilds had a ton of people coming in at launch, but the whole like soft sales rhetoric that for some reason every like doomer was wanting to try to sound intellectual with, it only proved like the trend of the previous Monster Hunter will get an immensely larger amount of sales after the newest one drops. So like, for example, Wilds did sell soft compared to what Capcom was expecting, because they were expecting a steady trend of like just higher sales, but they've also never had such high amounts of sales at one time. If I'm not mistaken, both World and Rise only sold 5 mil at launch each time, both of them.
Right.
And so, they've never had that many. Wilds, comparatively speaking, like World didn't sell 14 million until Iceborne dropped, which was a year. So they grew a pretty significant time over the year, but we're talking about 10 mil initial. So it's hard to really, statistically to be like, okay, this is what all this means. No, it just means, they sold less than they were anticipating, which, with negative reviews and bad press, that's bound to happen. But Rise coming up on its heels, World didn't sell as much as Rise, but that makes sense because most people have already played World at this point. World has had 28 million copies sold total, probably more at this point. Rise hasn't touched that, so naturally the next one to grow is going to be Rise. And World, people forget, they doubled their sales during Rise Sunbreak.
Yeah.
And Iceborne tripled its sales during Sunbreak and during Return to World. So it took campaign initiatives post-launch years afterwards for those growths. Maybe whatever. But I see Wild selling more, later on with DLC and more sales and everything. This machine is already rolling, dude. It's both like, I guess, comforting if you're a fan, but it's also disheartening for someone like me that doesn't like the way that systems are in place currently.
Yeah.
Like, I don't say Wilds isn't dead because I'm a Wilds glazer, like I'm saying Wilds isn't dead because that's not how these games work. And that's not how Capcom and Monster Hunter has worked in the past 7 years.
Yeah. No, 100%. That's correct. My thought process on that is like, hey, maybe there is something instructive to be gained from, the post-launch sales. Like, obviously the game has gotten quite a bit of bad press, for various reasons. Performance is just one element of it. I don't think we can chalk up a lot of the, sales data or whatever just to performance. Obviously, I think there's a number of other things that are going on that maybe people don't like, and even though the sales are strong originally, it's like, maybe this is just an idea. If, admittedly, in a hypothetical world, if performance wasn't playing its role in the discussion, if a lot of these other things that people have raised concerns about, whether it's, in-game or amount of content, cosmetics, paid DLC, the title update formatting, the drip feeding of content, name as many things as you want that people have raised concerns and made videos about or talked about and discussed. If those things were in a better state, would that lead to, a stronger amount of sales over time after the game has launched? Maybe. I'm just spitballing
Possibly.
on that. But,
Yeah.
it's just something to think about, because it's like, hey, maybe they've got data that doesn't indicate that that's the case, because from their perspective, it's like, hey, why would we want to invest a ton of time into those things and tidying up everything if we're not going to get any benefit out of it sales wise, when they could just make cosmetics and supplement their financial stuff with that. It's just something to think about. But I'm just I'm a little bit naive, and I'm my expectations are like where they are, and I'm just hoping for kind of things to be in a good state. And like you describe, I mean, hey, maybe that's a bit much, because yeah, the devs have been struggling to grapple with some of that stuff for quite a while now.
Yeah. Yeah, the out of touch nature and the notion that this works, doesn't bode well. Doesn't bode well for us.
But that's what it's all about. Jumping on and giving feedback and having a bit of fun in the process, obviously doing stuff like this and just throwing ideas out there, bouncing ideas off each other, and yeah, making some commentary about this stuff. And maybe some folks are out there listening, and we can see some more improvements in the future. Okay, let's let him carry on here.
Or ethical concern is going to be subjective, but I feel it's worth pointing out in this discussion. Another factor to consider is that, frankly, much of the advent of endgame systems is actually somewhat spurred by community desire. These systems would not continue to exist if they weren't successful and well-liked, at least to some extent. Many people will even get mad if they're not present or robust enough. Look no further.
That was me. That was me.
Yeah.
Sorry. I might have contributed to that. Obviously, this video has come out since I made my video. And I mean, hey, my video wasn't even really, focused on like wilds, at least within this context. I've obviously talked about Arshan before, but I mean, it's more of a commentary about, some of the stuff that has been poor, and then acknowledging some of the stuff that has been good as well. And yeah, obviously when things are quote unquote not robust enough, or you've had a departure away from things that were good, or things that had good elements to them, and that those things have been disregarded, yeah, that's a bit, that is a bit upsetting. And it's not that, I even raised the question in my in-game video talking about, hey, do we need to have RNG and, you know, heavy systems like this to engage players. And I don't think that's true. You know, there are a lot of ways that they could be designing things, and it doesn't have to involve an endless grind. It doesn't have to involve a lot of the stuff that has been bad in the past. So, I mean, obviously that's the title of this video. Does it need an endgame? But yeah, people naturally are going to get, you know, have things to say when there have been precedents before and that a new game comes along, and in some cases we're taking steps back. So yeah, I mean, that's fair enough. I mean, I've contributed to this, and a number of other people have talked about Arshan just within the context of Wilds, but my video was just covering everything and like going, hey, talismans in 3rd gen, pretty awful. Turns out. So yeah, it's just all a part of giving feedback, you know?
Yeah.
Right, let him carry on.
Further than Wilds to see this in action. At launch, Wilds offered only a fairly average grind for materials and a grind for creating Artian weapons. This was met with much pushback, asking literally, why doesn't Wilds have an endgame? The situation with Wilds is more complex though, because tied up in it was also a desire for the endgame to be more challenging. Challenges in the endgame is nothing new, but they're generally relegated to powered-up monsters or specific event quests, or perhaps high levels of systems like guild quests or anomaly investigations from Sunbreak. And so due to all this feedback, Wilds has seen something of an overcorrection in its updates, with more monsters being thrown into newly created ranks that give monsters drastically increased stats, along with the addition of being able to obtain more powerful talismans from those higher ranks. This has created a messy, almost slapped-together feeling endgame. I think it's fairly obvious that they didn't intend for Wilds to have any robust endgame systems to start with in the base game.
Pause for me real quick. Pause for me real
Mm-hmm.
quick.
Yeah, sure.
Sloppy, slap together. People use buzzwords like this all the time, but what does that even mean? Like, World Drops, it has RNG decos, it has augments.
Stream stones.
Now,
yeah.
Yep, stream stones. And I think one of the funniest points people make is, well, you weren't just farming tier 3 tempered elders, because you would have to farm the tier 2 tempereds to get your decorations. But what people aren't understanding is, that wasn't an intentional thing. That was a inconsistency with how the loot pools work. So imagine, so like, if you were farming the guild quests, and instead of 126 to 140 guild quests being the most efficient farm for the divine armor spheres, which is like the only place you can get them, imagine if they made it to where you actually had a higher percentage chance to get the divine armor spheres, because the loot pool is more diluted at 126. So you had a much higher percentage chance to get more divine armor spheres from 100 to 126. You could be like, well, you weren't just bum rushing to get to 126 and then going to 136 and 140. No, you would have to farm 100 to 126. It was more. There was more to offer. No, that was a bad loot pool dilution problem.
Yeah.
And it would also go on to, people had legitimate cheese strats because you had infinite flash potting in World whenever it first dropped. So people would have cheese straps where they would do things like fight tempered Legiana until it was ready to go away.
Yes.
Or it would fly away, and then they would just infinitely flash pot it to death. Exactly. And the reason why you would have to fight tier 2 tempereds was so you had a higher chance to get better decorations like non-elemental boost and shit, because you had decorations that were so strong. Yeah, you had decorations so strong that were diluted in tier 3. So it's like, and even then, like, Wilds has no end game. Wilds had the same end game layout that World did, base World did.
I think it was even better, to be honest.
System. To be honest, I think it was better too. And people talk about the Arkfeld funnel and anything like that, but technically there was multiple ways to get these other things. Arkfeld was just the most consistent with the way that spawning monsters work through resting. Yeah. So it's like, there were flaws in it. I didn't like either system, don't get me wrong.
Exactly.
But to say that there wasn't one present is flat out wrong. But also, isn't just adding on any system, like you could say it's slap on or whatever, but you could make an argument that augmentation and you could make an argument that for you honing was slapped on. you could make an argument that anything was just slapped on,
right?
Because it's all just adding another layer of RNG. And you could make an argument, sure, that the talismans, you can tell they weren't originally supposed to be there, and it just doesn't feel as impactful. Anything that can add build diversity to by any means is impactful to the game in a significant way. Maybe not to you specifically, but to a lot of people that enjoy build making, having different opportunities to do different things with their builds, have more incentive to create new armor pieces. Yeah, that's kind of significant. That's kind of important. That's kind of an end game. I hate this whole like, it wasn't originally planned for this. The anomaly system, the way that augments work in anomaly, they weren't the original intention because they had to change it and rework it.
Yeah.
But guess what? It's fucking great now. The augments in the anomaly system are absolutely amazing because they slapped on changes because they weren't intentional. No, no, it's better now. It's actually better now. Iceborne and Clutch Claw, they slapped Clutch Claw on. Well, they buffed it twice and added Shaver Jewel. Did they slap on Shaver Jewel? Sure, maybe, but it still made the Clutch Claw better to play with. Like, just because people are... Like, I don't get this criticism of, they had to overcorrect and add something. They improved something that was already present. That's all we could ask for. When you want them to make a whole new, different game, they can't do that. You've already paid for this one. This is what they've put their dev time into. You might not like it, but improvements on the systems that are already in place that's all we can really get.
Yeah, that's fair.
And so like I don't like that whole rhetoric of slap on sloppy. It's like everything is slap on sloppy when you think about it. It's if it's unnecessary to the finishing of the game, it is technically slap on. Technically. Guild quests, you could argue it's content bloat. Anomaly quest, it's content bloat. You could argue optional quests are content bloat just because it's not to the true meat of the game and the progression and everything. Some people like that shit. We don't have to use weird buzzwords to describe something. Like, how is it an overcorrection? It's just a correction.
It was just more that people were asking for it, so they put it in the game. People were saying there wasn't enough reward or incentive. They were saying that the challenge was not at a good level, so they made an effort to improve it. I mean, technically it is slapped on, but like it's like you said, it's all you can ask for. That we're giving feedback. They put the feedback into practice, and then there it is. I think he's more making a commentary about that being the original plan of like, him talking about it being slapped on in the regard of maybe they weren't prioritizing it at the game's launch, that they weren't planning to have to do more or introduce these different difficulty ranks, or that maybe that comes back to your whole idea about them being possibly out of touch in some regards. Like, maybe he's talking more about that whole thing where it's like, they're going to be fine with what we have lined up for them. They release the game, and then a ton of people give feedback about, the challenge and the reward and how that integrates within the end game. And then they bring these new systems and these new changes to the table. Maybe, and that's probably fair. I mean, maybe they weren't dialing into that and they misread the room on what folks were really wanting from a launch experience. So,
see, I'd be more inclined to agree with you if he wasn't using words specifically like overcorrection, sloppy, clumsy, all that stuff. Like I've seen people criticize updates towards quality of life. Like if they adding an item box outside of the tent, and they're like, look at that, they're so sloppy. It's so they're adding an item box to add quality of life. If 4 Ultimate added an item box post launch into the hub, so I didn't have to change my equipment in the house and leave the hub every time in multiplayer, I wouldn't be sitting there. Look at them; they're having to correct their mistakes. Overcorrection much? Overcompensating much? Like it's weird. Like what is this dialogue? What is this rhetoric? What is wrong with you people? You know what I mean? You know what? I'm a tone down before I have my own Rurikon crash out session. Like, but still though, like I just think it is not only unnecessary, it's just weird. Like some of this stuff, they're listening to feedback and they're responding and they're adding new things. And sure, you could argue it's slapped on, but anything that is like this is slapped on already. We didn't have to have stream stones to augment weapons. We didn't have to have a more anomaly quest. You know, we didn't have to have a whole nother 2 regions to the guiding lands. You know, we didn't have to have any of these things. But they slap it in there. But it's never been a bad thing until Wilds. It's never been a bad thing until Wilds.
Yeah. And hey, it's a wording thing, and I get it. It's tough even when scripting to like sit there and like, you know, convey points and communicate things and, you know, come across in a fair way and reasonable way. So, you know, we're doing this off script, and hey, it's difficult even when you're scripting with an infinite amount of time. You know, obviously you're trying to get points across and things like that. And even in my videos, my scripted videos, there's probably a lot of wording that I probably shouldn't have used. So, yeah, like 100%. I agree with you though. I mean, what more can you ask for? I mean, obviously we'll let him continue and see what the overall sort of pointers in the commentary here. But yeah, I also I sympathize sometimes with, you know, it's difficult to communicate. I'll
communication's not easy. Making videos ain't easy.
Yeah. Okay, let's let him cook some more.
Normal. Monster Hunter 4 only had guild quests. The rest of its endgame systems didn't come until G rank. Monster Hunter World was devoid of almost...
Wait, what was... Can I just replay that?
Yeah.
And that's actually normal. Monster Hunter 4 only had guild quests. The rest of its endgame systems didn't come until G rank.
Does he just mean honing?
I don't know.
Is that it?
I mean, there were still talismans, there were still guild quests, there were still relics.
There's still melding. You still meld in MH4.
Maybe he's working off of bad intel. I don't know.
Possibly. I mean, the rest of its endgame stuff is just honing. I think honing was the only thing that was added in 4U because of the Apex, the Zenith crystals or whatever. But let's let him just replay that because I don't think that's entirely what was going on there. But
I think it could be just bad info or something.
The rest of its endgame systems didn't come until G rank. Monster Hunter World was devoid of almost any endgame systems until Iceborne came out and added augments and the guiding lands.
Right, okay. So this is
augments were in base world.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he just has bad info.
Well,
I think he's just working off bad info.
Yeah, making a point about the base games not having anything and then the G rank expansions coming in and doing that. And I really don't like that discussion. Even if it was... what he's talking about is not even the case, because guild quests were in MH4, talismans were in MH4, and they redid melding and a pile of other things. And then, yeah, World, obviously, they were trying to do... Like, you can't say that RNG decos is not part of an endgame. They did tempered monsters, they did, you know, an entire reward system around them with stream stones as well, in base World. So they were clearly trying to build off of, you know, the blueprint that MH4
and Streamstones
built.
was exclusive to the tempered monsters. You could get decorations anywhere, but the Streamstones specifically for augments were specifically for that post-game content.
Yeah. So this is, maybe a little bit of bad info here, but I mean, even still, like, even if that all lined up and that was all evidence to say, oh yeah, well, the base games have never had anything and it's been the expansion's job to come in and provide that, I don't agree with that. Like, again, it's the whole thing about, hey, the status quo doesn't have to be the case. And that's the whole expectations thing of like, hey, just because this is how things have been in certain instances doesn't mean that we can't want a bit more or want those improvements to be carried forward. So I don't agree with this anyway, but Yeah, I'll let him carry on.
Monster Hunter Rise as well featured only grinding materials and talismans until Sunbreak came out.
Yeah,
All
but isn't
of which
that
is plenty
an
of
endgame
content for hundreds of hours of gameplay. If
Yeah,
you
technically
want,
that would match
and harkens back
third
to the
gen.
days of old before endgame systems even existed. So in this way, Wilds was really just continuing the norm, but obviously expectations have changed. Perhaps it's just indicative of people having higher standards. Games are getting more expensive and demanding higher-end systems in order to run, and the expansions already have had these endgame systems for ages. So why not the base games too? At the same time, though, I wonder if maybe it's something of a vicious cycle. With the prevalence of live service games, people have gotten primed to expect more content being delivered faster, and in turn, this causes developers to feel pressured to meet this expectation, which further feeds the player desire. The situation with Wilds, I feel, may end up having consequences for its future. The increase of challenge has given rise to a level and rate of power creep the series has never seen before, with the endgame monsters being faster, more complex, and dealing more damage than you can often even find in G-rank games. Which calls into question, what is Wilds expansion going to look like? There's really only two scenarios I can think of. The monsters will have to go even further beyond to maintain the difficulty curve, or they'll have to do some sort of soft reset at the start of Master Rank. Neither one sounds very ideal, not to mention the endgame systems themselves. Are they going to bring the new talisman system forward into the expansion, now probably in addition to various new systems added with the expansion? Or is it just going to get left in high rank as an abandoned era of the game's lifespan? If I had to guess what the main culprit behind this mess we're seeing in the modern day is, I'd say it may just be a result of inevitable growing pains that the series was going to have to deal with. We're only in the second generation since Monster Hunter exploded in popularity. There's many new players and many new expectations that developers are having to grapple with now. While Wilds largely did nothing outside the norm for Monster Hunter, perhaps the classic formulas are beginning to crack under the weight of the series' size nowadays. It's possible we could see some very radical changes in the future. But we're getting off topic. This is about endgames and their changes throughout time. I think throughout the series, endgame systems have felt a bit tacked on. The core loop was always supposed to be grinding as many monsters as you want for equipment, and then being satisfied with what you have and calling the game beaten. Every new endgame activity has basically just been drawing that process out longer and longer, and trying to incentivize it with new reward systems. And it works, honestly. It's probably not subtle that I prefer the older pre-endgame style, but despite that, I've still sunk hundreds of hours into the endgame systems of modern games. After how vast the content grind was in Iceborne and Sunbreak, I actually really enjoyed Wilds as a bit of a break. Being able to just make a bit of gear at the end, then call it a day was nice. That was, of course...
Right. I mean, that's fair. But what I will say is, you could have just stopped and had that same experience if there was a grind, and it offered more. And as he said, you don't have to do it. It's not mandatory. So, I mean, would you have had the same experience if Wilds was offering more? You know, would you have just had the same thing where you take a bit of a break and you just stop when you're content with it? You can still do that, you know, even if there is a proper system built up. Like he said, it's not something that you have to go through and engage with if you don't want to. You can just take a break when the progression ends, and that's fine. That's always been an option. But, I mean, he just said he's spent hundreds of hours within the end games of these games that have good systems. So, I mean, it's not really a point in either direction. It's like, hey, do you like them or not? You said you've played many, many hours within them, but also you're completely fine stopping whenever you want, and that's fine.
I think to give credence to Mosaic's point, I don't think he voiced it very well, but he lightly touched on it and how he prefers the previous ways that it used to work. And also he touched base on it, on how they had to localize the difficulty into superpower versions of like going further beyond and all that.
Yep.
I think what he failed to like put completely, also crazy frame, by the way, on that pause. Crazy frame. But to give him that credence. It's something we touched on early on in the reaction, was the notion of the way that progression was localized very differently before they added all like the superpower systems
Yes.
and the end game grinds, and that it was more of a low rank through high rank was the focus, not a pseudo tutorial into another pseudo tutorial into G rank, into G rank being another pseudo tutorial for a big like
Right.
post game thing or event quest thing. I know that's a very reductionist way to put it. I'm not saying that's a perfect comparison or anything, but like that's the way some people see Monster Hunter now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that he wants that old design loop back, but he's acknowledged that the new one works, and naturally most people have only had their experiences with the new ones, or they even prefer the new ones over the old ones. I think that's a fair point, you know, to want that old school style back.
Mm-hmm.
But
He seems happy with both. I mean, he
Yeah.
said he played a lot of the more recent stuff. So, I mean, he's doing Risen Shagaru right here, and you know, still, it's providing that if he wants it. I mean, that's what most folks, you know, outlook on it is. It's like, hey, yeah, it's there for the people that want to grind, that want to keep playing, that enjoy the combat, that enjoy participating in these systems. You know, it's not a bad thing. It's only a bad thing if those systems are super frustrating and the design is not there and there's things about it that are done poorly, you know?
yeah. And also big ups to Mosaic. I know that I was talking about like his rhetoric earlier, but then he goes and he says every in-game system has been kind of slap on.
Yeah.
Big ups, you know.
You could make that case. You could.
Yeah, he acknowledged the point that I was making, so he wasn't just singling out wilds or anything, it seems. But I would still, you can make that argument. I would still kind of disagree. But at the same time, at least he made the argument for the across the generations. So, you know, kudos. I take back some of my you were bad with your rhetoric. I see what you're putting down.
Yeah. It's always important to let the video rock a bit instead of us just going off and saying certain things. But yeah, I mean, you could, and that same logic, you could say that like even high rank, you know, you're repeating the same monsters. Like, is that slapped on? You know, at what point does that whole conversation change? Yeah, like it's the same game that's slapped on again. You know, but yes, it's more complicated.
It's literally
than that.
just, hey, here's this monster with more health, more damage statistically, and a new move or two potentially.
Yeah. So it's like that's a complicated thing. It's like I'm not in that camp. I don't believe that. You know, but I get what he's saying. I get what he's saying of like, hey, the progression had an end. I preferred that. And it feels as though these other supplemental things that are extra at the end of the game are slapped on. I don't agree, but you know. And he seems to enjoy participating in the stuff anyway, so obviously it's all a bit more complicated than we're discussing and letting on to, but let's let him continue. We might be on the home stretch here.
Yeah.
Short-lived as title updates have come out. There is one underestimated consequence of these systems, I think, which is a feeling of burnout. I know I felt this very strongly with Sunbreak on the Anomaly grind. At some point, it can start to feel that you're no longer grinding for a specific reward or a goal, but rather just to progress a system until you can do the thing that you want to do, or obtain what you want to obtain. When there's materials or monsters locked behind a certain tier of progress, especially at the end, and you're just going through the motions until you can actually get to what you want. This isn't something that really existed prior to endgame systems. If you felt a sense of burnout, you were sort of just done playing the game. There wasn't anything else to do. Regardless, these systems are undeniably popular. The trend of the series has been increased popularity and an increased demand for more and more Monster Hunter content. I think in the future, we'll see more of the games designed warped around endgame-like systems, and maybe even integrating them deeper into the core gameplay loop, before you even get to the endgame. As for me, I'll always just enjoy a good old-fashioned endless Rathalos plate grind. What do you think about endgame systems in Monster Hunter? Let me know in the comments. That's all from me for now. See ya.
Okay. Good stuff. Good commentary.
Yeah.
Overall. I mean, it's funny he mentions an endless Rathalos plate grind, and then also talking about burnout. Of like, I got burnt out with the anomaly grind, but also, hey, I prefer grinding for, Rathalos plates. It's all just different flavors. Like, that's what it's all about with a lot of this stuff. And we're getting into the granular details of things, obviously. But, I mean, I enjoy the grind. That's me personally. And whatever form that comes in, yes, I'm wanting it to be engaging and I'm wanting the design to be done well and I want the reward to be there. And yes, there's a lot of things that go into that. But I enjoy the grind. I'm not going to divide things up and say, I don't like anomaly grinding, but I do really like an endless plate grind. There's obviously levels to it, and there's things that you can prefer, but are we in favor of grinding, or are we not? I am, so I'm going to try and be consistent on that. But yeah, there's obviously things that are a grind that are not done well, and I don't think it's as easy as just saying, oh, the inherently the concept of a grind and it being drawn out is a bad thing, like he makes it out to be when he even says that he's participated a lot in those systems, And I've participated in bad systems too. I mean, hey, I played a ton of base world when it came out. I was farming for decos, and, it doesn't necessarily mean that even though I'm playing it quite a bit, that, it's an excellent system or anything like that. There are other reasons, I was in school, I was coming home playing after school and things like that. I was younger and, it was new age Monster Hunter. There's a ton of other reasons why I was playing the game, aside from whether or not the end game was good or bad, even though I don't think RNG decos or streamstones was a particularly well-designed end game, but I played a lot of it. It's just important to be consistent and, that lines up. I'm a grinder. I played a lot of base world, but I can acknowledge the things about it that were not handled well. So.
Yeah, and I think all of it comes down to pain points when it comes to the flavor, and also like different amounts of dopamine hits, I suppose.
Right.
And also strategy. So many people got burnt out in Sunbreak because they didn't know how to grind efficiently, and they thought you had to have a spreadsheet open to get the perfect skill for the Curios crafting system, and they would burn their 5 Great Azuchi afflicted pelts, and they wouldn't get a good skill, so they'd throw a little tantrum. The RNG sucks, and when you could easily just go for slots, man. Go for slots. Don't spend too much time there. You don't actually have to get the upgrades to stick around with the content until a little bit later. So there's different things where people can burn out in different ways, especially if you feel not rewarded in some way, or if you feel like I can tell you, there's a couple things that I've had to grind in Monster Hunter, even in 4th gen, that it's just dear Lord, it was painful, dude. Getting Elderfrost trunks from Elderfrost Gammoth in GU, you had to break the trunk, and you would have a percentage chance to get the trunk. And you would have to have a lot of them to make the weapons that I wanted to make. And I made the Elderfrost Lance, and I made the Elderfrost IG. It took forever. And my RNG was so bad that I ended up not even doing the subquest strat, because even that was just taking so long because I wasn't getting any. I started fighting the EX Deviant Elderfrost just for the higher percentage chance. And it took a lot of repetitions of that with Valor HBG, with my buddy, who was also running Valor HBG, to be able to get enough trunks to make these weapons. And I was close to just being like, you know what? No, I'm just not going to do this. I mean, there's like aspects to the Monster Central grind that I'm just like, I just really don't want to do that. I got to make a white Fatalis helmet for one of my builds that I drummed up on Athena's ass for IG, and I don't want to get 3 white Fatalis Devil Eye. I don't want to have to do that. You know, because I know that I'm probably only going to get 1 per hunt with my terrible luck, and that's if I even get them. And it was the same thing with like grinding out Bounding Dalamadur. Like it took a whole night and with some of my boys, you know, you were there helping me out get that. It took like a whole night of grinding just to be able to make that. And dear Lord, that was like, it was fun, but it was also like bone crunching. I was like, damn. And like, I did a whole play session with Birdie to go from anomaly rank 220 to 300, and that took the same amount of time as getting Bounding Dalamadur.
Right. Yep.
Like that was nuts to me, and like at least I enjoyed. I can't say I didn't enjoy going from 220 to 300 more than getting Bounding Dalamadur. So like it's just different elements of what do you look at? You know, do you look at the time spent? Do you look at having to do the same repetitive thing over and over again? Is it because of the fights? I can tell you why I liked grinding from 220 to 300 more. It's because I think Risen Shagaru is a more fun fight than Shah Dalamadur. You know? So like, because Dalamadur is cool. Don't get me wrong, he's cool. But the novelty of him being a cool monster doesn't supersede the fight being like just kind of okay.
Yeah.
And also being really long. You know, we were killing Risen Shagaru Magala in like 6 and 7 minutes, and Dalamadur was taking forever, and we were having to break specific parts. And so it's like, you know, different people like different things. I can see where he's coming from. And like there's different like toleration you might have for different RNG elements. For me, sometimes I get in the mode of, I know that I have to grind something that I don't want to grind. I just put my head down and I do it, you know, and it sucks for that day, but afterwards it's a little better, you know, and I get to play other things, and, you know, I get rewarded. As long as I get rewarded, I'm fine with it. That's why I didn't like the Cool Teroth, you know, system. Yeah. You know, you grind that, and sometimes you just wouldn't feel rewarded because you wouldn't get what you want. And so like that comes back to, you know, you expressing love for target farming and stuff like that. Like that, I'm right there with you, man. You know, like I'd prefer being able to narrow down those percentages to be able to get what I want in a better way that feels a bit more respectful of my time. You know, a game that isn't it. Sure, like all the games are kind of holding you by your toes and like, hey, we got this thing you could get, we got this item to chase. But some games are a lot more obvious with it than other games. I never got that non-elemental boost in Monster Hunter World. So I never got to use Diablos IG at the time where it was the strongest. I never got Guard Up Deco. So I wanted to run Guard Up on Lance. It was just a novelty I wanted to run. I never got to do it. You know, like there's different... I never got to put Health Augment on my Devil Joe Insect Glaive because I could never get 2 Warrior
Stones.
Yeah, I had plenty to get for like my Lance, and I never got to do it for IG, which is my main weapon. So like there's different things that I put a lot of time into that I never got rewarded for, and that feels bad. You know, that actually feels bad.
Yeah, and it happens even in, you know, quote unquote the progression, like you just said. I mean, Elderfrost Trunks, what you know. Dalamadur Glaive, or, you know, Laggy Horns for those that remember in 3rd gen. Like a lot of the grind can even be localized at many points, you know, throughout progression in a lot of the different games. So I get what he's saying. I mean, you know, that is sufficient, you know, for him, that those experiences are enough, you know. I get it.
Yeah.
I do get it. But yes, it's different. Like, that's the thing. I am consistent on, you know, I'm completely fine going and grinding a low drop in progression, if it's going to lead to me, you know, feeling rewarded, getting an upgrade or whatever it may be, just the same as if I am grinding in an RNG based system as well, looking for progression, looking for reward and that sort of thing, provided that the stuff is not, you know, super frustrating and has issues. I'm there. Like, I'm for it. I'm wanting reasons to play the game and engage with the game and feel that reward, feel the incremental upgrades. You know, that's what Monster Hunter's all about. So that's what I'm coming into these games for. And whether it's, yeah, just a bit more of an RNG related system that's dialed up at the end game, or through the progression, I'm there for it. So good stuff, man. Is that enough of a yapping session for you? You said a lot of stuff. Any other things you want to add? Any other points? Any other things to cover? Or you think you've...
I think I put it all out there, man. I think I put it all out there. Mosaic, kudos to you for making a really well made video. I think one of my favorite parts about your video, man, excellent song choice, dude. I was just like nodding my head throughout every single part of your vid, dude. Listening to the music, excellent taste.
Is that Pokemon Legends Arceus that I heard? One of the little like open world.
Maybe I'm not
tracks
sure,
there?
but there was some good stuff though. Thanks for making this vid, Mosaic. You know, excellent catalyst for discussion. It's important to have like every perspective out there, and sure, like anyone can scrutinize any video. Making videos isn't easy. I know you put in some good work on here, and even if you got some details wrong, like the 4 thing and stuff like that, that's all right. You know, everyone gets video details wrong sometimes. Not gonna fault you that hard or come down on you hard. Honestly, you always make pretty solid videos, dude. You know, that's all I could say. I guess, you know, thanks for making the vid, Michael. Thanks for having me on, man. It was fun,
dude. Pleasure, absolute pleasure. Obviously, this is my first sort of thing doing this, and you've been doing a lot more commentary than me. So I figured this was more, you know, up your alley. And yeah, thanks to Mosaic for providing the catalyst, as we like to say, for our little discussion here. So yeah, hopefully you all have enjoyed this, enjoyed the listen, and yeah, it's been awesome having an opportunity to jump on and yeah, just have a bit of fun talking MH stuff as we do. So thank you all very much, and we will catch you again very, very soon. Happy hunting, guys.